So, we're going to go to In the News right now, as soon as I can find it. And we're going to talk about, guess what we're going to talk about first? Really? We're going to talk about the coronavirus. Let me tell you a couple of things first before I get into In the News and the coronavirus news that's on here this week. So I listened to, and I didn't want to, but for your good, I go through so much for you, I want you to know that. I listened to Joe Biden today. And so it was only for you I did that. I want you to understand that. Joe Biden got up and said that he was not going to make this political, and he was reading from a teleprompter, so somebody has obviously told him he can't go on his own anymore. And he was stumbling a little bit, but he was reading from a teleprompter, and you could tell that it was a manufactured speech because he started to blame President Trump for everything he's doing. He's talking about if he's the president, he already has a council, he said, and we have to look at the science, saying that we need scientists that are looking at this and professionals. That's exactly what Trump is doing, but the thing that was amusing to me was the fact that he politicized it. And so saying he wouldn't, but he did. And so they're weaponizing this thing. Now the coronavirus is the panic is way out of hand. I'm getting people on the internet. I was just told that some of the people are writing to me and they're saying that I'm not taking it serious enough. I am definitely taking it serious enough. Listen, I've been through cancer, have some lumps on my body that actually can take your life. They're not going to take my life, but don't tell me I don't take something seriously enough. I understand the flu, I understand cancer, I understand those things. The coronavirus has a death toll, but it's nowhere near the death toll of the flu. So imagine the news, all the news that are pumping this fear. Imagine them getting on nightly news every single night and telling you how many people have contracted the flu this day and how many died this day. Listen, you would stay home and you would never go out of your house. And why did they not cancel things when everybody's dying from the flu? In 2018, 80,000 Americans died from the flu. You know what else bothers me? They're not telling you how many babies are aborted every day. That's also a death. And so basically what we're seeing is a panic. And I think there's a lot of underlying causes. It's going to pass. Are some people going to die? Yes, some people are going to die. That's what happens when disease spreads. That's what happens. It happens from the flu. It happens for any disease. I told you, I think last week, I read a book, and I suggest this book to you. It's a secular book. It's a book that's called The Brief History of Everything. It's the best book I ever read outside the Bible, believe it or not, even though it's secular. And in that book, it says, Bill Bryson wrote it, it says, viruses allow us to live on the planet. Now, it's secular. I know God gives us life, but viruses are everywhere. Every single thing you think of is a virus. Every vaccine that you get is because of a virus, whether it's from measles or anything else. And they all pretty much replicate themselves. It's all pretty much respiratory. And the respiratory viruses attack your lungs. So obviously, it's obvious that the people who have compromised immune systems and have problems with their lungs are more susceptible to being extremely sick and maybe even dying. But again, that ratio, and here's another thing, they tell you that ratio of death is very, very high. No, it probably isn't. Let me tell you why. Because we're not testing everyone. There's people that have this and have gone over it and gotten over it because you probably have a mild case of it, and we've never tested them. And so the ratio is not right. And anybody with a common sense would understand that. So to answer my detractors who are saying that I'll make light of it, I'm not making light of any disease. I am telling you this panic is not warranted. And the panic is being used by politics. Let me tell you something. Politicians don't care about you. You need to know that. I don't care what side they're on. They don't care about you. They want your vote. And let me tell you, they'll do anything against the other side so that they can get your vote. And so don't be caught up with that. Now, am I saying don't take caution? No, of course be cautious. Should they not have told us to wash our hands when the flu was going on? So they not told us to avoid crowds when the flu was going? Why didn't they cancel schools then? So there's a panic mode that's set in. Will it pass? Well, of course this virus is going to pass. It's going to get lesser and lesser. Let me tell you what happens with viruses. Even though there's a strain that comes up, and I'm giving you a lot tonight, but even there's a strain that comes up that they don't have any antibiotics for, or maybe they don't have any vaccine for, that strain always starts to delineate after a while. I'm going to say something to you that's going to mess up a lot of people. But the polio vaccine wasn't really something that helped polio. Polio was declining all by itself before the vaccine came. Viruses always reach a crescendo and then they go down. It's happening in China right now. And so take that with a grain of salt. If you want to write to me and tell me I'm not taking it seriously enough, that's fine. You can come to MD Anderson with me next week or wherever I go next month, and we can see how serious life is. It's not about not taking it serious. Yes, we should have precautions, but don't buy the bill of sale that's being given out tonight. So let me give you a couple articles. And again, these articles may or may not back what I'm saying, so I'm going to tell you the articles. Coronavirus are a family of viruses. That's the coronavirus. If you want to know how it works, those little spikes, like any virus, attach to your lungs. You breathe them in, they attach to your lungs, and they replicate off your lungs. So lungs, I believe the cells that are in lungs are called alveoli, and they don't necessarily replenish themselves. You're just like brain cells. You have so many of them. So if you have a compromised immune system in your lungs, obviously that's going to hurt you because you're not going to be able to replace those cells. This is what kills you. That's what kills you. Pneumonia kills you, not the virus. Same thing in any flu. So this is what happens. And can you stop that? Well, again, they're telling you some things that we should already know. Somebody sneezes your way, 6 to 10 feet, you're going to get those droplets. You don't even have to be near somebody to get droplets, by the way. All you have to do is breathe out. Microscopic droplets come out all over the place. In that book, Bill Bryson's Brief History of Everything, I just remembered it. He actually says something that's absolutely true. You and I are breathing some of the cells from Alexander the Great. Yeah. We are breathing some of the cells of anyone that's lived on the planet. You're breathing those cells because those cells continue to, it may not be a lot, but they continue to migrate through the planet. So it's really something to understand the nature of this and to understand what's happening. Again, I'm not making light of it. I'm just trying to give you a balance to it. So this says this: coronavirus are a family of viruses named after the appearance, a crown, you can see it there, said Dr. Mark Rupp, an infectious disease expert at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. How dangerous is coronavirus? Most coronaviruses cause mild symptoms, that patients easily recover from. COVID-19 is not the same as other coronaviruses, however, that commonly circulate among humans and cause mild illness, like the common cold. Some canine and feline coronaviruses only infect animals. Rarely, animal coronaviruses that infect animals have emerged to infect people and can spread between people, which is suspected to have occurred for the virus that caused COVID-19. I'm not really sure of that. It could have been something that escaped from a lab, so I'm not really sure it went through animals, but regardless of where it came from, it's always worse in the beginning. And I want you to know that. So it's been called a global pandemic now by WHO? World Health Organization. And let me tell you, a lot of these world organizations, whether it's WHO or the UN, again, don't have your interest in mind. There are globalist elites that are all out there that want to take advantage of everything they can. Let me tell you who's taking advantage right now. Our stock market went down another 2,000 points today, 10%. And let me tell you who's going to take advantage. The ones who have deep pockets, and they're going to buy those stocks very, very low. And they're going to make, those billionaires are going to make much, much more money on those things because they can afford to do it. So there's a lot of things happening here that I'm not really sure I trust the simplistic answer to. You with me tonight? Amen. Here's another one. Containment efforts have failed. What happens next? And this is about the coronavirus quarantine. Come on. I lost it. There we go. Okay. As confirmed, cases of COVID-19 continue to pop up all around the United States. And by the way, the only states that don't have it now are Idaho, Alaska, West Virginia, and Alabama. So, do you think it's going to stay that way? No, of course not. So, the virus has already shut down the school system in Japan and Italy. It is now causing various closures throughout the country, including Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Rhode Island. California, Washington, and Oregon have reported community spread, which means they can't trace it anywhere. And the investigators are unable to figure out where patients have contracted the virus, which leads me to another thing I've been watching and I've been seeing. So they're telling you that it can stay 3 hours on a hard surface. And then they tell you it can stay 6 hours on plastic. So can a flu. So that's nothing new. That's something that again, more panic. That's nothing new. That's exactly what a virus does. It also says this: a community spread is generally a turning point in an outbreak that means the illness is uncontained. An explosion in purchases of essential items like food and toilet paper took place all over the country this weekend as people began to become more aware of the need to be prepared to stay home for a period of time. How many of you witnessed that? All right. A series of errors by the CDC is part of the failure. The CDC failed to follow guidelines laid out by the World Health Organization and developed its own test. Unfortunately, that test was faulty, putting the nations weeks behind in detecting cases. The lack of a reliable test prevented local officials from taking a crucial first step in coping with the possible outbreak. Vice President Pence said over the weekend that 75,000 more testing kits will be made available this week. Don't be surprised to see a sharp increase in cases once more tests become available, of course, because there's a lot of people who have this and don't even know they have it. This won't necessarily mean that the illness is spreading faster. It just means that people will be diagnosed instead of being told they have the flu and getting sent home to spread it further. It goes on. What happens next? Federal and local governments will try to mitigate the spread. Expect to see more quarantines. Let me tell you this. The government is not going to stop this. It's not going to happen. Our government's not the one that's going to stop a virus any more than they created the virus. It's not going to happen. Can they mitigate it? Possibly, but they're not going to stop it. It says expect to see more quarantines, workplace and school closures, and cancellations of public gatherings. And again, I'm going to just keep interjecting here if that's okay. So they put a barrier around 1 mile around the radius of New Rochelle, New York, because the most concentrated cases are there in the world. That's where in the United States there's the most cases there. So you can't go in and out of Rochelle, New York. And you can't go to church or synagogue. Think about this. If the government, and the government said, if the government said to us without the coronavirus, you can't assemble in church, every single one of us would be up in arms. But if they say you can't assemble in church because you're going to die of the coronavirus, everybody says, oh, okay. So there's a lot more here than that's at stake than what we're thinking about. How many are still with me? Amen. All right, so let me go on. I'm trying not to interrupt myself, but it's hard not to interrupt me. All right. As other countries hard hit by the coronavirus cancel public activities and shutter schools, HHS Secretary Azar said that such measures could be part of the containment toolkit here, if needed. Keeping kids home from school and running workplaces on a skeleton staff is part of what experts call social distancing, a way to keep people from passing disease to one another. Does that work? Of course it does. You keep somebody with the flu away from you, you're not going to get the flu. So yeah, I understand the logic to that. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the most effective way, because it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stop it. As recently as 2009, a flu pandemic led to school closures in many U.S. communities, but not like this. And trust me, there was a whole lot more of it. There will be a lot of personal economic ramifications to this. Bingo. That's the thing that we're seeing the worst. There is a pandemic of panic. And so we're watching this, I mean, the stock market, if we didn't have as healthy of an economy as we have right now, this would have bottomed us out. Thank God that President Trump built up our economy so much, because right now we're taking the blow. And it's kind of interesting because it's a big blow, 2,000 points today. First, it means that there could be a lot of people not getting paid. I heard one person say that they want to mail out $1,000 to every adult in America. And where are they going to get that money from? Shortages will become more obvious soon, and this is true. Face masks won't be the only thing in short supply soon, despite CDC specifically not recommending them for healthy people trying to protect against COVID-19. As people clear the shelves in supermarkets and general merchandise stores across the country, some of that inventory may not be replaced quickly, and that is correct. Mainstream sources suggest we could see bare shelves in mid-April, but I suspect after the weekend's buying frenzy or just-in-time supply chain could begin to fray very soon, and I believe he's right. Part of this is the fact that so much of our merchandise originates in China, and it does. Millions of Chinese people in numerous cities have been quarantined for more than a month, so production has ground to a halt. Secondly, shipping has seriously declined. World ports are already seeing an impact. So even those who have money could soon have difficulty finding the products they want. If you haven't stocked up, they say now is the time to do so. I think it's smart just to have some stuff in your refrigerator, in your closet to begin with. Most Americans, the report came out last year, have 3 days worth of food in their homes. Well, if you have a snowstorm in Alabama, how many know what happens there? So I think it's really good to have that in case of anything. Do I think you should go overboard? Absolutely not. So just listen. If you haven't stocked up, stock up. The economy shows all the signs of a pending recession, and that very well may be. I don't believe it's going to happen, because I believe the summer will kill off the virus as it does. It'll probably come back in the fall, but it'll kill it off. And I believe the stock market's going to rebound because we have a very strong economy. We have a very strong economy, and there's no reason to think it won't. Investors are bracing themselves for another bad week in the market next week. The travel sector and shipping industry are due to lose billions if the current trend continues. Economists warn we could be looking at a full-blown recession. Consumer spending, says the Washington Post, has propped up the U.S. economy for a decade. With potential job losses and income interruptions, people will wisely pull back from non-essential spending. You know, it wouldn't be a bad idea for people to pull back from non-essential spending because we're such in credit debt, it's not even funny. I'd hate to see the fact that the virus makes us do that, but it wouldn't be bad if people did that anyway. It says the odds of recession are roughly a coin toss, and that's exceptionally high, said Edward Al-Husseini, an analyst of Columbia Threadneedle Investments. Conferences are getting canceled. Corporations are asking people to work from home. Schools are getting closed. It's a massive hit to demand. This is a situation that the usual government policy repairs cannot mitigate. Interest rates cut by the Federal Reserve, some now speculate the Feds will be forced to go to zero interest rate. It can lower borrowing costs and raise stock prices, but they can't replace the goods made by factories closed to keep their workers from getting sick with COVID-19, and that's correct. The serious respiratory illness the virus causes. The government can try to pump more money into people's pockets directly. Like I told you, they want to give $1,000 to everyone, such as with tax rebates, but money alone won't put goods on empty store shelves. That's correct. This could be different from previous recessions like the one a decade ago. Not only will it lead to more unemployment and lower pay, but we'd also be dealing with an aforementioned shortage of goods. This could drive the prices of available goods up, creating a perfect storm for Americans. And again, this is again, running that fear of, is that a possibility? Well, sure it is. Does that mean it's going to happen? Not necessarily. We could begin to see social unrest, this says. Social unrest is different than civil unrest. It's the part that comes before a breakdown of the system, as people become more and more nervous. And that's the key here. The rumor mills begin and people start to take actions based on bad information. I just heard 2 reports from people here today about things that were rumors based on this. The rumors are going to fly. Not long before local leaders decided, in the words of one of them, that federal health officials didn't know what they were doing with their plan to quarantine novel coronavirus patients in a town called Anniston, Alabama. A doctor there set out in a biohazard suit to stage a one-man protest along the highway with a sign, "The virus has arrived. Are you ready?" The town didn't think it was. Residents already were unnerved by the strange stories posted on Facebook. And by the way, there are some strange stories. One of them is this, that you can drink some bleach, and if you have the symptoms, and it'll take it away. Not only will it take away the virus, it'll take away your life. What happened illustrates how poor planning by federal health officials and a rumor mill fueled by social media, polarized politics, and a lack of clear communication can undermine public confidence in the response to novel coronavirus. And that's absolutely true, which causes the disease named COVID-19. The panic and problems that burned through Anniston also provided a preview of what could unfold in other communities, as the spread of the virus is considered by health experts to be inevitable. This isn't to say that all the concerns of Anniston, Alabama are crazy conspiracy theories, but it's a glimpse of how quickly a community can lose faith in the local response and begin to panic. One of the guys by the name of Selko, he runs preppers.com, wrote a few weeks ago that the worst of the situation wasn't the virus. It was the threat to the system. And he's right. Virus or illness in itself may not be a problem in its essence, but the impact that it brings to the system and people might be so huge through the media that it causes the system to stop working in the normal way. And that's what we're seeing now. So you can find yourself in a collapse, not necessarily because of a huge pandemic, but because of the reaction to it. Bingo, he's right on. Another case might be the simple unwillingness from the system to admit how bad the situation is, like China did. So what might bring the system to a collapse might be real, a pandemic, or a reaction sphere. It's not Selko's first rodeo with the systemic collapse, and it looks like things could play out exactly as he predicted. And it could play out soon. So what should you do? Selko's advice, no matter what, in the end, it always comes down to basics. So when you're not sure what to do and when you are not sure what is going to happen, just go back to the basics and think about how you can keep yourself and your family secure and safe, fed as far as possible from trouble, healthy, warm, and for how long? And don't forget the emphasis on how long, he says. Don't get mesmerized by a particular possible event too much or too long, because yes, in the end, it's about the basics. The week ahead is likely to bring a rapid change in developments. It's important to keep a clear head, to be ready to separate fact from theories, and to choose reliable sources for your information. Stay away from situations that could escalate into violence or disorder, if it comes to that. You can't control the government response, you can't control shortages, and you can't control the overall economy. You can't control the system. While we may be in for a bumpy ride, the best way to keep it together during stressful times is to focus your energy on what you can personally control. I think most of that article is pretty good. What do you think? All right, let me give you a little bit more what's going on. Coronavirus. This is coronavirus and prophecy. Every week, the numbers of coronavirus infections and deaths continue to rise as the virus spreads across the globe. The origin of the virus is not yet fully known. Responses to this outbreak are disrupting airline flights, closing borders, bringing commerce to a standstill in affected areas. In China, the nation of origin for the illness, major cities have been quarantined for over a month, leaving many stuck indoors. And by the way, China's saying now that it's declining. So again, whether we know that's true or not, they're saying it's declining. They still have to pay their people to come back in, by the way, bonuses. Italy is more than, this one says 1,250 cases, that's way up. Italy is absolutely unbelievable. I saw some pictures of Venice. I've been there quite a few times, the Doge's Palace, which is huge. They have thousands of people in that square, not one single person there. Venice is totally a ghost town. Everybody's indoors. And let me tell you what's happening in Italy. The reason why it's spreading so much in Italy, a couple of reasons in my opinion. I've been there quite a few times. In America, there's not a whole lot of smokers. Smoking has declined. In Europe, almost everybody smokes. If you smoke, you're going to have some effect to your lungs. And in Italy, what happens is they're Italian, like me. They are huggy kissy. So they are very easy to spread this virus. They're not like some Russians who don't even talk to each other or look at each other sometimes in the Soviet Union. They're very, very warm and friendly. So obviously, if you're more communicable, you're going to spread this virus. The other thing in Italy that's happening is they don't have the health system people are getting turned away from hospitals. There's not enough beds. So it's obviously going to multiply. This goes on to say, some Italian schools, universities, museums, and cinemas have been closed and supermarket shelves have been fully emptied. 11 towns in the beleaguered Mediterranean nation are on lockdown for 15 days. Bible prophecy clearly states there will be widespread disease epidemics as the end of the age approaches, Matthew 24. The massive scale quarantines provide some insight into what this coming calamitous period could be like. One of the consequences of unrepented sins is that your highways shall be desolate. That's Leviticus 26, a condition which future epidemics could play a role. We do not know the exact events that will fulfill such prophecies, but the coronavirus epidemic gives a glimpse of what could happen. And I'm going to share something with you tonight that I shared last night. I wasn't going to, but I'm going to. I believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. I believe that we're going to be raptured before the tribulation. But I want to give you a hypothetical. Could you do that? Please don't go, and please don't write to me saying I believe in this, because I don't. I'm giving you a hypothetical. Let me tell you what really I think is a good understanding of what's going on. There is, and I've taught Revelation to many of you, and I've taught it for years and years. We know that tribulation will last for 7 years. We know that it's going to be mild tribulation and great tribulation. I've taught forever that mild tribulation is going to come on people, and they're going to think, they're going to be married and given in marriage. They're going to think that everything's okay. Mild tribulation won't be something that people look at and say, oh, this is God's judgment. They won't say that. They'll just look at the things happening. Now, just bear with me. Hypothetically, I believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. But on September 23rd, 2017, you know that I've taught on the sign of Revelation chapter 12. I had done a documentary in Hollywood on it, and it went all over the place. It's still on, by the way. The other day I was in my house, and I turned my TV on channel 500, and I went into the kitchen, and I heard myself coming out of the TV. They're still playing it for some reason. Well, if September, this is the hypothetical. Please understand this. It's hypothetical. I'm not saying it's going to happen. If the tribulation started with that sign in September of 2017, and the 3.5-year period would come around, that would be March of 2021. So in that time, we would have mild tribulation. We should be able to see the 4 horsemen of Revelation come out. Actually, we should see the first 6 seals. The first seal of Revelation is the white horse with the bow rider. That's the word of God. I've taught it many times. It's not the Antichrist. It's not a person, because basically all the other horsemen are events. It's an event. The word of God will go out. Has the word of God gone out to the world? Of course it has. Secondly, the second horse. Anybody know what it is? It's the red horse. It's the bloodshed. It's war. Do we have war? Worldwide, pretty much. I mean, we are involved in a war. It's not on our shores, but we're involved. Afghanistan, the Taliban. Matter of fact, I heard tonight that we bombed Iran. Iraq. So basically, we have war. That's the second seal. The third seal is the black horse. The black horseman is famine, and followed by famine, actually a measure of wheat for a penny. We know that these locusts are sweeping all over the planet right now, especially through the Sahara, through the Africa, and even into China, Pakistan, and they're devastating everything. There's going to be famine, and there probably is right now, worse than it's ever been. The fires in Australia, the breadbasket of the world, has ruined the crops. So that third seal could play out. The fourth seal is death, and that's what you're seeing right now, worldwide death, whether there's lots or little, through the coronavirus. The fifth seal is the souls under the altar that are martyred. That is happening. There are more people that have been killed for the gospel than ever before in our world. So I can easily see the first 5 seals being done. The 6th seal, by the way, is astronomical. There's something that will happen in the sky. I've been telling you about NEOs, and I've been telling you about things that are going on. So it's quite possible, and again, I'm not saying Jesus is coming back mid-tribulation, because I believe in pre-tribulation. But how many of you know Jesus doesn't have to come back on what I believe? Amen. I'm not bound to my beliefs. So even if he doesn't come back in the mid-tribulation, this is a great understanding of what's going to happen because we're watching this. This is the scale. So when I look at this, I see it in a prophetic view, and I see this is what's happening. What's happening with people? Great fear is coming on them. There's panic coming on them. They're not praising God or getting on their knees to God yet. And that's why tribulation continues on. That's why the judgments get worse and worse. Now it goes from the seals to the trumpet, which are worse, and then finally the bowl or the vial judgments, which are horrible. And so because people are not repenting to God. And so we're watching something that really is a parallel and again, I don't think it's the thing, but I think it's a parallel to something that would happen just like this in a more maximum size. How many get that? All right, so what are our young people? What are our millennials doing? You got to love millennials. Young people capitalize on cheap coronavirus flights. One girl said, if I die, I die. If coronavirus gets really dangerous, I might as well be somewhere having fun, one California college student said. It says, people around the world canceled their trips because of fears of the new coronavirus, and Ashley Henkel booked 3. Henkel, 20, is taking advantage of cheap flights to see North America. She lives in California's Central Valley, but this summer she'll be in Vancouver, New York City, and Portland, Oregon. A college student itching to travel, she's one of many people staring at the deadly virus in the face and saying, whatever. As flight schedules are scaled down and airline stock plunge, carriers are offering deals that have put air travel within reach for people who usually can't fly. It's a high-risk, high-reward trip, she says. I feel like if the coronavirus would get even more serious and wipe out a huge amount of people, I might as well be somewhere having fun. Henkel told NBC News in a message. You gotta love them. She has thought about going on trips this summer, but it was too expensive. Now, as people self-quarantine, she'll be taking pictures in Times Square. Young people feel now is their time to fly, notwithstanding the dangers of spreading the virus to vulnerable populations. Multinational corporations like Google and Walmart are restricting non-essential travel. People are canceling trips and large conferences are being called off. Global air travel is projected to lose $63 billion to $113 billion because of reduced demand. Coronavirus got boomers stocking their doomsday bunkers, while meanwhile millennials are online shopping for bathing suits for the 5-island trip they just booked on Spirit for $130. So you got to love them. Let me give you a couple more if we continue on. And by the way, when I get to economy, I just want to give you a couple more on the coronavirus. But right now, let me go to Israel and tell you what's happening there. So, Israel, Trump to provide Israel technology it needs to take out Iran. Let me tell you how. Israel needed decades to take out Iran. If Israel indeed decides, starting to sound like Joe, if Israel indeed decides to take out Iran, the Trump administration has just made it much easier. Let me tell you why. That's because the U.S. State Department approved an Israeli request to buy 8 KC-46A Pegasus aerial tankers. Now, an aerial tanker is something where their jets can come in and they can refuel in the air. Israel has none of those. They've been leaning on one that's kind of a really old technology. What this will do is it'll give their jets 6,000-mile range. And so it's a game changer when you're talking about any sorties or any type of attacks that are going on. Every administration before Trump refused to sell Israel these. It gives them an advantage over the area. Listen, I'm telling you, bless that nation and God will bless you. So we're watching it happen. Let me give you another thing. This one is something that most people, it's kind of hidden in the news, but nobody gets it, but I want to bring it out tonight. This is telling the truth about Palestinian child soldiers. There are many things about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that the media focuses on, and almost all are bad and are about Israel. However, a few things that really should be focused on tend to be swept under the rug and ignored. According to Jerusalem Post, over 30 Palestinian children and teens were enlisted in stabbing attacks against Israelis from 2015 to 2016. These are kids. 29 Palestinian children have been successfully used as suicide bombers, with a few dozen more attempts being thwarted. These are kids having bombs strapped to them and going in areas and blowing themselves up. Over 17,000 Palestinian children were recruited into Hamas child militia programs in 2019. You're watching a picture of them right now. Palestinian children are encouraged to be the main force throwing rocks and other objects during protests that very often turn violent. More horrible still, the average pay that a child or their family guardian receives for doing it once, now they do it over and over again, they get $83 if they just join up. That's it. Utilizing children as human shields and as bomb carriers is unethical, it's abhorrent. And yet this issue is rarely talked about or brought up except in the efforts to demonize Israel. Very few blinked when it was discovered that their textbooks included rampant incitement, blood libels, and blatant propaganda for use in schools in Gaza, the Palestinian territories, and even East Jerusalem. So what they're doing, unlike Jerusalem is training its children in reading and writing and computer skills and math and language skills. The Palestinians are indoctrinating their children in hating Jews and Israel from the beginning of their school years. And the many Palestinian children's television programs that call for violence against Jews and spread propaganda continue to be aired with little scrutiny. So, for if we all truly do care about the plight of Palestinian children, as the UN tells us, we'll call out the abuse that their own government forces upon them and try to change the situation for the better. So we're watching a bunch of stuff happen that just doesn't make any sense. And when I get to economy, again, I have to go to the coronavirus because it's affecting our economy. So I have two articles. One of them is from the WHO, the World Health Organization. I want to read that for you. So when we look at the economy, this is maybe another underlying clause. I've told you this before. World Health Organization promotes cashless society over virus fears. If you want to know where this is going, this is where it's going. We've been talking about a cashless society. You've heard me talk about it for almost a year, probably more. And obviously to go cashless, they're telling you things like this. And they're even saying a dollar bill that you have is 90% bacteria on it. Well, actually, a dollar bill that you have, 90% of the dollar bills we have traces of cocaine on it. They have traces of everything on it. Because everything you touch that's in the public has some type of trace of some bacteria. So they're now saying, like it's brand new, that cash has traces of the coronavirus on it. Well, whether it does or it doesn't, that coronavirus can only live a certain amount of hours. But there's always bacteria on cash. So the Chinese have collected all their cash. I told you this before, so what this article says. And they've disinfected it, whatever that means. But the banks are saying that, well, why don't we just destroy it and go digital? Well, now the WHO, the World Health Organization, is saying because of COVID-19 and it's affecting communities across the world, this is the time for the world to go cashless. So we're watching. The establishment suggests that paper money be removed from the system because it's a viral spreader. And it says China is already pushing the situation right now. Brits and their fellow Europeans should be increasingly careful as the virus spreads across Europe, the WHO warned. When it's possible, it would be advisable to use contactless payments to reduce the risk of transmission. Of course, that's one of the world's major NGOs is seizing the opportunity to proclaim the virtues of paperless money is hardly a surprise. The globalist push towards a cashless society has been underway for years now. Having had its biggest successes in Scandinavia, Sweden has gone virtually cashless. And in such a short time, they've already confronted the many drawbacks of relying exclusively on digital money. And here's what happens next. The virus spreads throughout the US and Europe, and governments respond the same way China's government has. Martial law and full-blown concentration camp culture. This would lead to civil war in the US because we're armed and many people will shoot anyone trying to put us in a quarantine camp. Europe is mostly, and there's an expletive, magically we find ourselves in a cashless society in a matter of a year or two, which is what the globalists have been demanding for years. Everything goes digital, and thus even local economies become completely centralized as private trade dies. So one of the things it says, a viral outbreak is a significant danger to all of us, but an even greater threat is the supposed cure. Trading our economic and social freedom in the name of stopping the coronavirus, no matter how deadly the bug, it's just not worth it. So you get people to fear enough, and they'll stop going to church. They'll turn in all their cash. The government pretty much has them as putty. And so our biggest threat right now is the panic and the fear that this is spreading. And let me give you one last one. Thank you, Mark, for this article. I'm going to share it tonight. So this one says this. It says, last night, this is from Whitney Tilson. Last night, following up on yesterday's Empire Financial Daily, I sent the email below to my friends and family. Whether you agree or disagree with it, I hope you find it thought-provoking. The coronavirus panic is overblown, so it's time to buy. He says, for more than 2 decades that I've been in investment business, I've been studying 2 basic things, risk and human behavior, and how they interact. Countless studies, not to mention plenty of anecdotes, show that human beings are often terrible at rationally assessing risks. For example, remember the people who refused to fly after 9/11? even though the risk of another terrorist attack have fallen substantially due to improved screening and security measures? Or imagine someone who lived in Manhattan today, who rather than taking the subway due to concerns about catching the coronavirus, instead rides his bike to work. As someone who rides his bike almost every day in the city, I can assure you that no matter how contagious and deadly the virus ends up being, it's exponentially more dangerous to ride a bike in New York City. Or how about all the people who are canceling flights? Yes, it's reducing risk, but not the way people think. I bet my last dollar that someone is far more likely to end up in a hospital or worse from a car accident on the drive to the airport than from catching the coronavirus in the airport or on the plane. Many times throughout my career, when such irrationality has manifested itself in financial markets leading to big sell-offs, I've taken advantage and made tens of millions of dollars from my investors. Examples include the Asian and Russian financial crisis, long-term capital management, the bursting of the dot-com bubble, the great financial crisis, and the European sovereign debt crisis. I've also profited when investors overreacted to health scares like Ebola and SARS, bird flu, and MERS. I think the coronavirus will be another similar case for the many reasons that I outlined in my special report. He says, as far as everyone, I find no evidence that the risk of serious illness or death from the coronavirus for the overwhelming majority of Americans is anything but infinitesimal, like 1 in a million. We know how cold viruses work. They cause runny noses, sneezes, cough, fever, make us feel tired and achy. Yes, the virus is different and worse than other coronaviruses, but it still looks very familiar. We know more about it than we don't know about it. Governments are willy-nilly making drastic decisions that profoundly affect the status of human freedom. Based on Austin, Texas precedent, any mayor of any town in America can right now declare a state of emergency, cancel events, shut malls, close parks. Who is to stop them from shuttering stores, restaurants, schools, and churches? And they're doing that, and quarantining whole neighborhoods. For this reason, we have every reason to be concerned. And are we really ready to impress the world and imprison them, wreak financial markets, destroy countless jobs, and massively disrupt life as we know it, all to forestall some uncertain fate? Even as medical professionals do know the right way to deal with respiratory illnesses in general from a medical point of view. It's at least, he says, some may respond to this by saying, Whitney, you might be right, but until there's more clarity about the coronavirus, my view is better safe than sorry. So I've canceled all my travel plans and any activities that would put me in contact with large numbers of people. Now listen, I think that's perfectly reasonable point of view, but that's not how I choose to live my life, upending my life because of a 1 in a million risk. In addition, if everyone collectively decides to play it safe, the resulting shutdown of our economy will have huge costs. The bankruptcy of untold numbers of people and companies, no thank you. It's kind of an interesting thing. You still with me tonight? I know I'm going a little long. I know I'm reading a lot, but I want you to get the full gist of it. Anybody know what that is? That's 2 men outrunning females. Arizona fights Democrats to keep men out of women's sports. So not a single Democrat in the Arizona House voted Wednesday to protect women's sports. Fortunately for the state's girls, every Republican did, and the only hope for school athletics moved on to another chamber. The bill is about fairness, Representative Nancy Bartow, Republican, argued. That's it. What's fair in the field, the court, the track, and in the pool. Bartow, like a lot of moms, is sick and tired of people trying to turn the debate over girls' sports into something it isn't. We separated male and female sports for a reason, she insisted. Biological differences. That's not mean or intolerant, that's reality. She then talks about her daughter, who has been in this race, by the way, and was beat out by one daughter was beat out by 2 males. She was on a scholarship, she lost her scholarship. She talks about another daughter who's playing softball, and that daughter says, we're defeated before we even get out there. There was a male on the team. It was psychological, he was physically, gave the advantage, and they beat us because he was better than us. He was a male. And so sooner or later, we're watching these states start to really come and give some flat back. In the end, the bill passed, no thanks to Democrats, who voted to end all the progress women have made in the last 50 years. But Arizona Republicans aren't alone in their rush to protect the girls. The 6.6% of the population trying to destroy half of the sporting world. A whopping 18 states now are moving towards similar proposals, thank God. Desperate to stop the bleeding before talented girls lose more championships, scholarships, and promising futures. But if they're looking for an ally in Nike, forget it. Nike, the retail giant, is actually giving people in Idaho, in a similar bill, they sent a spokesperson to the company who was a trans-identifying athlete to testify against the bills. So apparently the biggest manufacturer of sports equipment doesn't mind alienating half of its market, and we're watching it happen. Let me give you another one that's coming on. So these are cartoons. 1 million moms were quick to condemn the recent Clifford move. It's a cartoon. 1 million mom declares PBS Kids should not introduce the LGBTQ lifestyle to young children. PBS Kids should stick to entertaining and providing family-friendly programming instead of pushing an agenda. Once the more mainstream children's programs start to promote such episodes, we can expect the floodgates of a large number of kids' TV programming to have some kind of similar message that includes painting any parent who would oppose such wonderful events as full of hate. And let me tell you what happens with kids today. Whether it's kids or grandchildren, a lot of times they're sat in front of a machine, they're sat in front of the TV to babysit them, they're sat in front of an iPad, they're sat in front of a phone, and they get things that we think is children's programming. But listen, other popular children's shows fall in line with which include My Little Pony, with its episode of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, which introduces Aunt Holiday and Auntie Lofty, a lesbian couple and guardians of Scootaloo, and the iconic Sesame Street will soon have Billy Porter, a cross-dressing homosexual entertainer, as its guest host. The Cartoon Network was the first out of the gate 2 years ago when it featured a children's show which had same-sex wedding proposal. The proposal was between female characters named Sapphire and Ruby in the show Steven's Universe. Cartoon Network's Adventure Time series aired a scene in its series finale last year that showed two female characters kissing each other on the lips. Nickelodeon has featured the same-sex couple on its Loud House cartoon series, and Hulu announced more than a dozen new episodes of its series The Bravest Night, which features two gay men raising a young girl as their daughter. In addition, toddler drag queens with the show Drag Tots. These simplistically drawn toddlers who are somehow already living as drag queens explore facets of the drag queen lifestyle. They do this with the help of a cartoon unicorn voiced by transgender celebrity RuPaul. These drag queens themed adventures are placed in an educational context for the viewers, along with the lines of Magic School Bus, children's books, and cartoon series with tagline, "School has never been so fierce." Obviously an attempt to indoctrinate children to believe the drag queen lifestyle is both common and normal. The show features several prominent drag queens as the voices of the character, and the trailer ends with a chorus of children merrily singing the new jingle, "Drag, drag, 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 drag tots, yeah." That just rolls off their tongue. Disney will also be breaking new ground this month with the release of an LGBTQ character. The show will feature a Cyclops lesbian police officer whose sexuality will be explicitly pointed out in the movie, as opposed to just being implied, such as other Disney shows. A Common Sense Media study found that 75% of American kids aged 8 and under have access to a smart mobile device. And the American Pediatric Association has asserted that the average 8-year-old spends 8 hours a day, 56 hours per week, using electronic media such as laptops, tablets, and smartphones. The burgeoning kids content on demand streaming market makes it more important than ever before that parents monitor what their kids are exposed to. If you have grandchildren and children, you need to find out what they're watching. You need to watch it with them. If you think your kids are not coming under the influence of LGBT indoctrination, think again. While most of us have grown up on cartoons that were mindless and entertaining, many still try to communicate certain lessons or morals of life. Unfortunately, the leftist worldview of Hollywood is the prevalent ideology of the day, and they're not shy about promoting the celebration of the gay and transgender lifestyle in children's cartoons. The latest show to get woke on progressive LGBT values is PBS popular Clifford program. The Big Red Dog reboot is introducing a character in its show with lesbian parents. Clifford is following in the footsteps of the popular PBS Kids program Arthur. This show has a staple of kids viewing habits for over 20 years, but it didn't take long for writers to give in to the LGBT agenda. In an episode last year entitled Mr. Ratburn and the Special Someone, the show depicts the marriage of an elementary school teacher, Mr. Ratburn, a longtime recurring character, to another man. So we're watching it happen. How many are ready for some good news? All right, let me give you some good news, because all that's garbage. Here you go. A bill requiring parental consent before a minor can have an abortion recently passed in the Florida State Legislature, and now awaits the governor's signature. Republican Governor Ron DeSantis has said he will sign the bill into law. So he says, first, it'll save the lives of countless babies born to pregnant minors. Second, it'll protect parents' rights by requiring them to be part of the conversation when a minor daughter becomes pregnant. So that's happening in Florida. It's also happening in other states. Finally, we're getting it. Finally, we understand that parents have a right over their children. So lastly, I just want to tell everybody that I know that everybody that's here tonight, that I have 2 packages of toilet paper, and I have 4 bottles of hand sanitizer, and I'm willing to trade it for a condo. Just want to let you know. That's why in the news. I'm going to ask the ushers if they'll come forward.